Today, though, Jenna and I will be doing this session on optimizing board engagement, even during off peak season. So, without further ado, I'll hand it back to Jenna to get us started. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Thank you, Marty. Michaela, great to have you on the call today. And I'm seeing a lot of other new faces today. So, really excited that our friends in philanthropy have not already hit the dreaded summer slump. I imagine some of your boards and volunteer teams may already be feeling the call of summer and all the fun stuff that this holds and the busyness of the summer season. Let's dive on into today's presentation and talk a little bit about how we mitigate that dip in summer engagement and activity. So, show of hands, Trish, you can go on to the next slide. I'd love to see a thumbs up or a wave of the hand if you typically notice a dip in engagement from your boards, your volunteer teams, your fundraising teams during the summer months. Just who sees it, who feels it. I know as a former nonprofit employee who had like a miles, I see that thumbs up. You're already probably feeling it a little bit. Um, for me, I've always operated in systems where we had like a May 30 or a June 30 fiscal year end. And so there was always this rush of activity, and then there was a little bit of a sigh of relief when our boards and our volunteers like went away for a month, right? Because that's when we as staff members had to do all the closeout, the year-end reporting. We caught our breath for a minute here or there. And then we were busily planning for the following fiscal year as we got knocking into the season. The reality is, especially in development, we cannot really ever stop, right? Like the fiscal year ends and we roll right into the next cycle. Our campaigns might wrap up, but again, we're already planning the next opportunity or the next big need. And so, what is it that we can do to remain proactive and continue to optimize engagement over the summer? We are going to dig into some suggestions from the Pride team, but I'd love to see you all engaging in the chat. Thank you so much to those that are already typing away. I'd love to see what are some of the things that you and your fundraising teams do to remain connected during the summer. Do you change your communication schedules? Do you operate a little differently during summer hours? One, we need to support our teams, right? As Jared said, we've got to keep folks motivated and moving toward those goals internally, but we don't want to lose sight of our external volunteers and fundraisers as well. Let's see. We do have a slow period in the summer. It's July 1st. Yep, Karen, I think everybody needs to catch a good breather. What do we do though with our volunteers to keep them from getting too disengaged over the summer? Well, y'all continue to communicate in the chat. Let's go on and look at our first recommendation from Pride. I apologize for all this allergy season. So first of all, we want to enter the summer slump by setting clear communications and expectations, right? I always say if we want to hold our volunteers accountable, we have to first be accountable to them. And so if we promise there are going to be monthly communications, we have to act on that. We have to build that schedule. We have to make sure we have that content, and we have to promise that we're going to deliver what we actually say we will. So clearly outlining roles, responsibilities, and expectations for both parties, right? For us as the volunteer, for the leaders, for the staff members, for our internal teams, and then also setting those clear responsibilities and expectations for the volunteers that we are hoping to continue to engage over the slump. Um, when you ask your volunteers to serve, so I know Pride provides our clients with like a job description, right, for each of our committee chairs and each of our volunteer roles. Are you doing that for your board members? When you recruit a new board member, do they understand what they are truly signing up for? Or are you hoping they'll come along and sort of figure it out as we go? That is a real good way to bait and switch and surprise someone and disappoint yourself ultimately. We have to be very clear with our volunteers up front. We have to set those expectations. And frankly, we want to have an honest conversation about their bandwidth, their comfort, their strengths. And then we can play into those strengths as we find a niche or a unique opportunity for them to connect to our organization. Do you continually prioritize these expectations? So, again, your board chair is going to have very different roles and responsibilities than a general board member at large. A committee leader, a chair for your philanthropy campaign. Their time commitment is going to be a little bit different than the average volunteer, and their expectations in return for that time commitment are also going to be different. We need to provide opportunities to not only use their skills, but we need to be able to enhance their skills as well. Have any of you invited your volunteer fundraisers to join you on these virtual forums? Have you invited them to review your Academy notebook or some of the talking points that you've learned from Pride? Those are great resources. There's no reason for you to reinvent the wheel. As Pride clients, you have access to all of our training, and we want to pay that forward and provide it to your volunteers and your board members as well. So be sure to look at the opportunities that you can share knowledge, that you can provide training to your committee members, your board members, and your volunteers. Inviting them to PDI in the fall is a great opportunity to bring them into a conference where they're going to be with other CEOs and board members, and they can gain a lot of exposure and knowledge within the world of fundraising. All right, let's dive to the next one. While Trish moves the slide, let me take a look. Gloria, I love it. Micro events through the summer to keep the donors, the volunteers, and your team engaged. We used to call this mandatory joy at one of my nonprofits. Some of them were super fun events and there were great opportunities for team building internally. Some of them were exhausting. So I hope that you're balancing that load not only for your volunteers and your team. Gloria, yes, great way to get small groups together. I agree with Marty. I think it's super fun to have like affinity groups or small group meetings with different teams, both internally and externally as well. All right. Trish, oh, you did move it. Thank you. Again, as we're setting those communication schedules and expectations for the summer season, we want to regularly update our boards and our volunteers on progress, challenges, and successes. Just as Pride shares our client news very proudly, we want you to do the same with your internal and external stakeholders. Did Home of the Innocents announce that great gift to their board members, to their volunteer fundraising committees? If not, it should totally be on your communication radar. Even during the summer, even when they're perhaps a little less engaged in the ongoing day-to-day operations, we want to keep them connected to our operations and to our goals as we chip away at them, right? Consistently providing updates is an amazing way to keep people connected to the work that you're doing. That can be volunteer fundraisers, but that can also be your on the ground fundraisers that are coming in and providing hands on service at your organizations. Even if they're not there stuffing goodie bags and folding t-shirts for you, you can let them know about the good work that is still happening during the summer, right? What are the ways that you can keep them in the loop, help them to feel like they're in the know at all times? Again, don't reinvent the wheel. If you always sent a Friday weekly email to your volunteers, keep it up. Even if they're not meeting, again, even if they're not actively volunteering during this summer season, continue to share a few tidbits about what your team is doing over the summer, how you're continuing to meet your goals and move things forward, even in this time of sort of summer reflection and wrap up and reporting. Celebrating successes, as I said, it's a great way to keep people involved in the cause and keep them motivated to continue to do the work, especially with fundraising. Every one of our, Pride recommended committees is not going to hit a home run month to month. But when we share the successes from every committee amongst every committee, we all get to celebrate that win, right? And I find that it motivates other teams to move a little harder toward their activity goals, to make a couple more asks because they want to be the next success that is celebrated across all the fundraising teams. And I think, to Gloria's point, whereas you might always separate your committees to meet at 4 different times or over a couple of different days for fundraising, bring them together during the summer. Let them have one big group meeting during the summer so that they get to mix and mingle and hear from a different group of people and sort of see what everyone is working on. I think that's a great way, again, to share knowledge, to motivate everyone and to give them a little bit of a different experience outside of kind of their normal routine and schedule. And last but certainly not least, I believe, especially in building donor relationships, being as transparent and honest as possible is always the most important thing we can do. So let them know about our challenges. We don't want to beat them down with the struggles of our day to day operations, but we certainly want to be honest about where we are seeing hurdles that need to be overcome. Oftentimes, this is where you learn about a board member's strengths, right? They have some tips and tricks for mitigating those sort of challenges. And this may be an opportunity for someone to really rise to the occasion and provide additional insight or perspective that you may not have sought during your natural course of volunteer work. And again, bringing people into the sausage making, if you will, is oftentimes a really great way to build a deeper partnership, a greater respect for the work that you and your team are doing. And I believe it brings them deeper into the reality of the operations of our organizations and all that we face, good and bad. Trish, I think it's time for tip number 2. Awesome. Providing meaningful involvement opportunities. Each and every one of our volunteers, our board members, are unique individuals. And just as we would craft a unique donor stewardship or relationship building plan for each of our major gift prospects, I encourage you to consider the same for your key volunteers. You need to have some one on one time with every one of your board members. The summer's a great opportunity to do that. You can carve out a 30-minute one on one. It could be a Zoom, it could be over coffee. It provides a really great opportunity to do a check in, especially if you've had a busy board member who's been very, very involved in the operations and the successes over the last fiscal year. Scheduling a little bit of time to discuss their involvement, to get their feedback on the year and how their work has been going within your organization, asking them questions. How do they feel about the board? How do they think of it like a mini study, right? You're really rediscovering their why. You're rediscovering what motivates them as a volunteer, as a board member, and you're also giving them an opportunity to share any frustrations or concerns they might have in a very private setting, not in the boardroom, completely surrounded by your entire volunteer team, right? This gives you a great opportunity to build rapport with them as an individual and also discover other ways that you can best use their time and their talents and continue to keep them engaged in the year ahead. Assigning your committees or special projects to small groups so that they can really dive in and make significant contributions. I often find that our um, more reserved volunteers, especially on a board, our newer volunteers, are the least likely to speak up in those group settings. So, taking some time to give them the floor, to intentionally give them a leadership opportunity that's a little lower risk, right? It's a little lower stakes. And there's not as much peer pressure from the full board or the full volunteer team sort of watching them. I think that that's a great way to pull your volunteers out of their shell, to give them a true opportunity to thrive and succeed. And it's also a great way, again, to make sure that they're involved with your organization because they are motivated and they're passionate about your service area. And again, it's a really wonderful way to sort of tap into their why and their skills and their desires for the work you are doing. All right. And one more slide, Trish. Y'all are almost done listening to me sniffle. Um, Again, as we are considering ways to provide meaningful involvement opportunities, think about the activities that align with each of your volunteers' skills and interests. If you've got a CPA on your board and they just spent all of their hours in spreadsheets and tax returns and all the fun things that our CPA friends get to do, right? Maybe they want to do something not Excel sheet related. Maybe not. Maybe that's their comfort zone and that is where they rock and that is where they want to live. And they can organize your inventory list and they can do some other tasks that for them are super quick and easy. And for you and your team will be incredibly meaningful at the end of the summer. Where do you need help? Where do their skill sets lie? Where are their knowledge sets and expertise? And where do they want to expand their experiences? That's a great opportunity for us as a nonprofit to give them ways to stretch and grow and to gain new experience. And again, it's a way for us to engage them and push them outside of their norm day to day work, but in a way that really leans on their skills and builds out our team as well. I often tell our boards, especially at a smaller nonprofit or on a small team, our board members are there to help us build out the gaps in our staffing teams, right? So we need to lean on your expertise, we need to call on your special skill sets, and we need your help to do things independently, to do them in your own way, and we have to bless them by letting go of that work and letting them thrive and succeed in their own way as well. I think we are moving on to tip number 3. And with that, I will hand it over to Marty.
Thanks so much, Jenna. So, many of these tips are things that we should be doing all the time. And I don't want anyone to say, oh, but like now's not the time to start this. I want the tips to like, what should I do right now? Right. Hopefully, you're getting some nuggets of both, right? Because I think no matter where you are in your engagement with your boards, there are tips and things that you can do now, and there are ways that you can pave the way to make sort of incremental changes over time as well. So just keep that in mind. This next one, establish regular and effective meetings. If you have had a schedule out far in advance, again, you're establishing those expectations. People know, like, I'm on this board, I'm agreeing to serve, and this is the meeting schedule. If we're constantly changing and just throwing a meeting out there for the next month every time we have a meeting, they don't come to have that expectation of like these are the expectations from a broad perspective. So if you're able to schedule out regular meetings for the full year and out in advance, I think that's super helpful, right? But what are the things that you can continue to do to establish those effective meetings to make sure that people want to show up, regardless of if they're busy, right? If they're busy, if they're have other things going on, they're not going to want to miss, right? What are those things that we can do? We don't just meet just to meet, right? But we shouldn't be canceling meetings regularly, or you're going to decrease the importance in their mind. How many of us have been like, oh, we've got a meeting next week. I don't think anyone's going to show up. We probably should just cancel it, right? I've seen it. I've seen people say, we're just going to cancel the meeting. We'll just handle everything at the next meeting. If you continually do that, it just all of a sudden decreases importance. Oh, it's not important to them. It shouldn't be important to me. So make sure that we have that consistency, engage them in what that looks like, right? Okay, we're going to meet quarterly, we're going to meet every other month, what's going to work best, and we might have to adjust sometimes, but if they come to expect consistency, they're going to be much more likely to show up, right? And it'll be have that higher level of importance. um, I personally think it's best when we can all be together in person, but you have to recognize in the summer months, once in a while, you're in a community, especially that like they're just gone for the summer. So rather than them saying, hey, I'm gone, I can't be there, considering that virtual option just for those summer months would be something, if you already don't do it, that could increase that engagement, right? Let's say I'm at my summer home and I'm not where I normally am. If there's the virtual option and you've already created like the expectations that these meetings are using my time wisely, I'm much more likely to say, like, absolutely, I'll hop on a Zoom call and I'll be a part of that. So consider that if you're not already doing that. But make it that that's the exception and that's not how all of our meetings go, because you do want their engagement in person whenever possible. Next slide, please, there, Trish. So, if we are providing well prepared agendas, that is also going to help the engagement at the meetings. So often we are busy and we throw together that agenda the day before, the day of, right? I'm sure we're all guilty of it from some time or another. And then we're like, oh, like I'm on the agenda. I don't have time to talk to these people and tell them what needs to be done. And we end up sort of talking at them, right? Who's done that? Show of hands. Come on. I know we've all done it. I've done it, right? We've all guilty of it. So if we have well prepared agendas, set some deadlines for ourselves, focus on strategic issues, things that require them to think and contribute, lead them down a path that we want to get their feedback rather than leaving it open. If we're not asking them for feedback in some meaningful way, they're going to come up with ideas because they're more than likely ideas people, and it's gonna be something that we don't want, and we're gonna have to be like, "That's a great idea, but no," right? How many of us have had that happen? We're like, "Oh, these are ideas people, and they just keep coming up with ideas, and they're none of them the direction we're going." Shame on us if we did not prepare the agenda of our meeting to lead them down the path of where we need their good ideas and how we can have strategic discussions rather than just talking at them. They're just sort of rubber stamping things, right? So making sure that we are intentional about those agendas, we do them far enough in advance, and we're encouraging active participation and open discussions, right? Put them on the agenda. Ask them to lead a discussion. They will surprise you. They'll do a better job than you sometimes, and everyone will be winners, right? So being intentional, taking the time to have a well-prepared agenda that encourages that participation and open discussion is going to make it so they want to show up and they're not going to want to miss out and they're going to prioritize your meetings. But it does take that planning and it does take the intentional advanced preparation with some one-on-one conversations to build that culture and foster that. So what are the little things that you can do as you move forward? Be thinking of those. I'm going to pause for 1 second because I see a lot in the chat here. um, and I want to make sure, Jenna, I think you have been very much addressing these isn't the board's agenda with them talking and discussing and staff saying as little as possible until asked. Absolutely, yes, that is, it should be, but I think too often we are not intentionally doing that. So I think that's absolutely how we want it to be, right? And that's in a perfect world. We recognize this is not a perfect world, right? But doing the little things to make them get out of their comfort zone, make them lead the way, say, this is what I think, but what do you think? Help get them going and down that path is so helpful. All right, let's move on to the next slide. um, and we touched on this earlier, y'all. We've got to prioritize recognition and appreciation. And so we saved this one for last because I really do feel like this is something that there is absolutely no time like the present. Gloria mentioned earlier the little things throughout the summer. Use the summer months to recognize their contributions, celebrate their achievements, get that culture of gratitude. If you haven't already been doing it, what a great opportunity. Have some one-on-one time, schedule a couple of summer socials, um, get them to maintain that personal connection and feel good about it with whatever you have to work with. Foster that sense of belonging, their sense of commitment. This is the perfect time to find those opportunities to do some of the fun things, right? To get to know them on a more personal level. Because in doing so, you're going to be able to continue to accomplish work with them throughout these summer months, right? We want to do this all the time. We want to have regular and consistent recognition and celebrations and all of those things. But if we start now during these times, people will feel really, really good and connected as we continue through these summer months. So I know we've covered a lot today, but I do want to see if anyone has something, off of the chat, just real quickly, about something they're doing. And Gloria, not to pick on you, but since you did say some of the things you had scheduled, would you like to just share what a couple of those might be? Feel free to unmute. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah. This is awesome to get to be a part of. Thanks for having me. And all the insight you guys are offering is so helpful. I'm taking notes here. But something that's been helpful for us in the summer of just trying to keep people engaged with these micro events is doing like dinner parties and socials with the whole goal of making our donors, volunteers, and our team feel well celebrated. They work really hard like all year round. So this is kind of our opportunity to give back, to support them, to keep them excited. And like one of the things we talk about on our team is how do we get people to feel convinced that they're supposed to be here without us having to convince them? And belonging does that. And so really just doing everything we can to make them feel like they belong, they're a part of this mission, and they're not just workers or trying to help us get somewhere, but they are a part of us as we get to that location and that destination as well. So those are just some fun things that happen. Dinner parties are a huge win all the time for us.
People love to eat, people love to drink, people love to gather around those. I love it. Thank you for sharing. It doesn't have to be, complicated. It can be something, people are having get-togethers. I think in general, people get out and about a lot more in the summer months, right? So just tap into that. Ask your boards and committee members, what are you doing already that we could, use as an opportunity to celebrate our work together. I love that. Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone else doing something fun, different to recognize and celebrate your boards, your committees, your teams? Any other exciting things to share? Don't see anyone coming off. It's okay. Well, lastly, do we have any questions before we wrap up today? If you do nothing else, schedule one meeting one-on-one with one person that you should be talking to one-on-one. There's a person that's in your head right now. Everybody has them. I've been putting this off. I haven't connected well with them. This is something I need to do. I need to get to know them better. Schedule one meeting. Just start with one. And you'll have so much insight, so much perspective, so much a better connection. And then you go on to that next one at a time, work your way through those key important volunteers, and that engagement will drastically increase. I know it will for you. So